Hi, my name's Sonia Lindsay. I'm a landscape architect here in North Vancouver, and it is the end of February, and we are going to be checking our beehives today and showing you a little bit about what the next steps are for preparing your colonies for springtime. The first thing I want to do is actually see if my colony did survive, and I'm going to get on my bee suit, get my smoker all hooked up, and we're going to take a little peek inside first. Just in my previous video I showed how to winterize the bees, and for this we had insulated and tarped the top of our hives to keep them warm and dry for the winter. So I've just pulled the insulation apart for now so that we can take a peek in the beehive and see what's going on inside. First step we do is we pull off the top lid. That's what's protected the hive from the elements this winter, and you always have the top lid on anyway. We have a little insulating layer in here for the winter time, which we'll take off in April as the weather warms up. It just keeps the hive a little bit warmer because heat rises. The other thing is, what I hope to find is that most of my bees, or a good chunk of the bees, will be at the top of the hive. Bees will, in the winter time, form into a tight cluster. This cluster is like the size of a football. They'll start at the lower end of the hive here, and the cluster will work its way up into the springtime. What they do by clustering is they keep themselves warm by forming this tight ball. They fan and they shiver to keep the queen alive. She's in the middle of the ball. And they work their way around inside this lower box, eating all the honey, and then they work their way up into the top hive to eat the stores of honey there by springtime. And then about now, the queen will start laying eggs again in anticipation of the spring production. So, I'm going to take a little bit of smoke here at the entrance. Because we do this to calm the bees. And at the top, just take a little look. And there you go. Now, interestingly enough, we don't have a tight cluster here today. The reason for that would be that it's quite warm today. It's probably about 7 degrees Celsius, so this cluster that I talk about loosens up, and in fact today I fully expect these bees to come out and do cleansing flights. They won't defecate in their own hives. They'll hold it all winter, and on the first nice sunny day they'll come out, do their cleansing flights, and then go back to the hive. So it looks like we've got some pretty good healthy bees here. But as a double check, what I want to do is I'm going to put this lid on because we don't want to, it's still fairly cold. We don't want to keep the hive the lid off for very long because we don't want to chill the queen or any babies that might be starting in there. So we'll open up underneath the first box, because what I want to see is if indeed I have lots of bees that are in the upper as well as lower box, and that'll tell me that my colony is quite healthy and survived the winter fairly good. And there you go. If you can zoom into here, you can see we've got a ton of bees. I'm also feeling the weight of this box. There's still a lot of honey in this frame, so I know at the same time I don't have to add any frames of honey that I stored for the winter that the bees created last year. I don't have to feed them any honey right now, but I'm quite happy. In actuality, the cluster is actually down in the second box still. It still hasn't made its way up. I suspect the queen is in that chamber right now. But this to me tells me that this hive is quite strong. It survived the winter very, very well. So I'm happy. Now, the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to check for varroa mites, because varroa mites will have been survived over the winter. I want to see what my mite count is to see if I have to give them any medication in the next coming weeks. I'm also going to feed them some pollen patties to get them stimulated to raise some young. So, we'll do the next step now. I'm going to check for mites, and to do this I need a piece of white paper, and I've actually marked off squares, and I need some mesh. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this white piece of board and I'll spray it with common PAM, because what I want to do is I want to put this mesh on top. I'm going to pull the bottom bee reducer out from the bottom here, and I'm going to slide this under. The reason I want to do this is that mites will naturally fall off the bees, go through the mesh, and land and stick onto this board. So in a couple days I'll actually take out this board piece, pull off the mesh, and count and see how many mites I have. And if I have more than 2 or 3 mites, I know that I have to start looking to treat them for mites. So, that being said, I'm going to give these guys a little more smoking. I think they're well aware now that the weather has warmed up quite a bit, so they're coming out for their cleansing flights, but they're probably a little mad because they don't want to be bothered at the same time. Take this bee reducer out, and hopefully, I'm sure there'll be a lot of debris on the bottom of this hive, but I'm going to try and slide this in as best I can. There you go. The other reason for the mesh is so that the bees, when they are coming in and out of the bottom, they won't stick to the board as well, and they'll be protected because they'll be sitting on the mesh instead of sticking to the board. So that's the reason for the mesh as well. I'll put the bee reducer back on because it's way too early to be taking it off, because right now what will happen is that as the spring progresses, marauders may come in and try to rob a weaker hive of honey, and the bee reducer just reduces the entrance, and so the bees are able to guard their entrance a little better from marauders. Now the other final step I do is I take this check mite, and this is the common medicine that you do use for the varroa mite, the one that's destroying a lot of the bee colonies. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it in the top hive in the middle, and this will also help to stimulate the mites to drop if there's any on any of the bees, so I can do a more accurate count of exactly how many mites I might have in my colony. So I'm going to go to the top of the hive again, give them a little smoke, and you can see now they're coming out in full force now. I'm just going to slide this strip down the middle, like so, and I'll remove it in a couple days when I go and check my mite board. The other thing I want to do, like I said, to stimulate production of the colony, to stimulate new babies, is I'm going to put a pollen patty now, again on the top piece. And what it is it's extra protein, because the bees not only need the honey to feed for energy, but they also need extra protein. And right now they've probably depleted all their their protein stores in the form of pollen. And so I'm just going to lay it across like that. And there you go. So I'm going to put back together the hive, and in about 1 week's time I'm going to pull out the varroa mite check, see what's happening, and I'm also going to medicate for nosema. And also just check to see if maybe perhaps the queen has started laying eggs. So, stay tuned for my next video. Thank you for watching. My name is Sangha Lindsay. I'm a landscape architect here in North Vancouver. We'll see you next time.